Hello, and welcome back to 50 States, 50 Murders, the podcast taking you, the listener, on an auditory road trip across all 50 states while discussing 50 different murders. Thank you all for tuning in to episode 11. Dakota, where are we going to be traveling to today?
We're going to be heading to Iron River, Michigan, where we're going to look at the murder of Chris Regan.
All right, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to episode 11. Real quick, I wanted to recap our first 10 states. We ran through our first 10 states. We did a little Memorial Day episode for the holidays last week. And just to recap where we are thus far, episode one, we started here in our home city of Akron, Ohio, discussing the case of Hannah Hill. Episode two, we were in Las Vegas, Nevada for the case of Melissa James. Episode three took us to Louisville, Kentucky for the case of Betty Jean and Corey Windsor. Episode four, we headed to Cripple Creek, Colorado to discuss Kelsey Barrett. Episode five took us to Middleton, Rhode Island, and we talked about the case of Antoinette Bandetti Bruce. Episode six, we were in Portland, Oregon for Daniel Brophy. Episode seven, we went to Arkansas City, Kansas. We discussed the case of Jody Sanderholm. Next up, we were in Tonasket, Washington for the case of Michelle Kitterman. Episode 9 took us to Columbia, Missouri, and we discussed the case of Jesse Valencia. And lastly, for episode 10, we were in Cottage Grove, Minnesota to discuss the case of Amy Allwine. Dakota, 10 states through, I'm kind of curious, what has been your favorite case thus far?
Uh, we have some good ones. I know my favorite episode to record was Colorado. That was
Okay.
the most I was excited to record, and I had a lot of fun doing that one. But as for case, I would probably say the Michelle Kitterman case. That was really interesting to me.
Okay. That was a really interesting case. I agree with you on that one. As far as our fictitious drive through 10 states, we've been choosing our states at random. So we have a little wheel that we found on Google. We spin it, and whatever state it lands on, that's where we go to. So that's how we pick up our states, if you ever wondered about that. Through our fictitious 10 states, we have a total of 225 hours of drive time, which is 9.3 days in total, and a little over 15,900 miles. Our longest drive thus far was from Middleton, Rhode Island to Portland, Oregon. That was a 43-hour, 3,000-mile trek. And our shortest drive was our last episode's drive from Columbia, Missouri to Cottage Grove, Minnesota. It was a 7-hour, 472-mile drive through 10 murder cases. We have had 8 females, 2 males, and 1 child. We have had 4 murders by stabbing, 3 murders by strangulation, 2 murders by gun, and we had 1 murder by a baseball bat, and that was in your state of Colorado. And lastly, in our recap here, we're continuing to do a blind ranking for all states. Dakota's going to give us his list of states in order of desirability to travel, 1 through 49. Ohio by default is 50. That's where we live. So far in our states here through 10 states, we have Colorado at number 1. The number 1 spot's already locked in. Number 4, Washington. Number 9, Missouri. And then we have a drop off. We have 26 Oregon, 28 Kansas, 38 Kentucky, 40 Nevada, 42 Minnesota, 47 Rhode Island, and then 50 Ohio. So now that we've done 10 states, we've discussed things about these states, and the 10 are locked in. We can't change it. But as you look back on that, is there anything that you feel you kind of question, you maybe marked wrong that you would want to change if possible? Or do you feel pretty comfortable in those 10 states thus far?
As of right now, I feel comfortable. Just with every other list, you're gonna the later we go, the more I'm probably gonna regret some of these. But as of
Okay.
right now, I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We got 3 top 10 states in there, and we have Michigan today. So I'm kind of interested to see if maybe we get another top 10 state this week. So yeah, as we close out our recap and we get back to our regularly scheduled road trip, we're going to be departing from Minnesota. And as you mentioned, Dakota, we're heading to Iron River, Michigan. Now, Cottage Grove, Minnesota to Iron River, Michigan is a 4-hour, 35-minute drive, 294 miles. So as of now, this officially makes our shortest trip. While we're in Michigan, we're going to be discussing the case of Chris Regan. It's a murder that took place 9 years ago. But before we dive into the murder case this week, let's talk a little bit about the state of Michigan.
Yeah, real quick. This is so you mentioned our things are all random.
Yep.
This is actually our first one that we picked. We have a pretty loyal listener in Michigan, and they wanted to hear their state.
Shout out to our Michigan listener. If you are a listener and you have a specific state that you would like for us to discuss and you don't want to wait, send it to us and we'll be more than happy to knock it out. That's not a problem at all. So this week we are in Michigan and it's nicknamed the Wolverine State, pretty similar to the Beaver State of Oregon. Michigan acquired its nickname through the fur trades of the 1800s. I guess they trapped a lot of wolverines and that's kind of how it just came to be. Murder per capita in Michigan is ranked 14th with 7.6 murders per 100K. And as we're located in Ohio, there's a built rivalry instilled at birth when it comes to the state of Michigan. But outside of football, honestly, there's really a lot to love about the state of Michigan. And doing some research, going through a lot of different websites, Michigan was pretty prominent as far as like in the top 10 of states with natural beauty. A lot of amazing scenery, lakes, forests, beaches, and plenty more. The state of Michigan is made up of two different peninsulas separated by Lake Michigan. And the two halves are simply known as the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula, or the UP. Dakota, I got a couple of attractions that I found this week for Michigan. I was going to go over these and see if maybe I can't get you interested in this. I know I did a really bad job last week with Minnesota. So I threw a couple photos on the Google Doc, maybe to help build up your interest. And first up, we have Mackinac Island. Have you ever heard of this?
No, but this picture does it justice.
Okay. All right. So it's basically just an old timey island slash village. And there's just a lot of shops and restaurants and a ton of hiking, which I know we like to do. There's a Fort Mackinac on the Mackinac Island. You have to take a ferry to get here. So it's sort of familiar with what we did when we were in Outer Banks. We had to take a ferry to get to the island that we would go to every summer. And what's pretty cool about Mackinac Island, there's no cars or buses allowed on this island. So
Okay, I like that.
yeah. Everywhere you go, you have to either walk, take a bike, or you have to take horse carriage to get around.
Oh man, I love that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. So a lot of cool photos. If you're listening to this, just Google Mackinac Island. It's a really beautiful spot. And it's just got that old school feel to it. So I thought that was pretty cool to kick us off. Next up, we have Belle Isle Park. And this is located in Detroit, Michigan. There's just a lot of different things to do here. Reason I threw this on here, I know you like aquariums. Inside this park, it is USA's oldest aquarium. So there's entrance fee up front. It covers everything inside. As I mentioned, really old aquarium. It's got an old school-esque vibe to it. And there are a number of conservatories inside the park with ponds, gardens, different species of plants. There's a memorial fountain. There's a giant slide, a golf range, and there's also a boathouse, which is home to the Detroit Yacht Club here. So again, another photo there. I don't know if that's something that you might like, but you can see the oldest aquarium in there. I know you like aquariums.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm in the tax bracket for the Detroit Yacht Club.
You might not, but hey, it doesn't stop you from checking it out at least. This next one I had to throw in for my own personal reference. I've seen this a couple of times scrolling on TikTok, and this place is really cool. Probably gonna butcher the pronunciation, but it's Kitch Itty Kippy.
Call it Palms Book State Park, Big Spring, or Kitchitikippy.
It's in Manistee, Michigan. It's a park slash. It's like a spring, a natural spring. It almost looks like a pond, but it's just the water is just glass. It's see through. You can see from the top all the way down to the bottom. I really want to go here myself, so that's why I threw it on here just selfishly. Its nickname is the Mirror of Heaven. It remains 45 degrees year round. So if you go in the peak of the summer, the water is 45 degrees. If you go in the peak of the winter, the water is still 45 degrees. So it never freezes over. Lots of different hiking. And there's this observation deck that you can get on, and you have like a steering wheel basically, and it's got ropes. You can kind of like turn the wheel and it takes you across the water, and the floor is see-through, so you can look down and you can see right into the water. You can see all the fish and the plants. It's really cool. It's a really beautiful spot. I think you would really like that
Michigan
one.
is they're bringing it on these attractions.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like that one a lot. I got one more for you here. I think this one would be an awesome spot. It's a restaurant. I don't throw too many restaurants on here, but this one I had to throw on. It's Mom's Spaghetti, which is in Detroit, Michigan. This is a fast food drive-through style restaurant that sells both spaghetti and spaghetti sandwiches. Why is this cool, you might ask? Well, it's because this is a restaurant that was started by Detroit's own Eminem. So you can get a bowl of spaghetti, and then Dakota, if you're brave enough, take a trip through 8 Mile.
Yeah, so regardless of our ranking or my ranking at the end, Detroit is probably dead last among cities that I will visit. So I will not be checking this out.
Okay, so you will not be getting a spaghetti sandwich at Mom's Spaghetti. Okay. That's understandable. I can understand that for sure. So speaking of Eminem, along with Eminem, who are some famous people from the state of Michigan? Well, you have Madonna, Floyd Mayweather Jr., Robin Williams, David Spade, Stevie Wonder, and then one of Dakota's guys, Kid Rock.
Okay. The hell?
You love Kid Rock. That's one of your guys. So I thought you would like that. So that's the state of Michigan. Lots to do, lots to see, and some notable names that are from the state of Michigan. And I'm really looking forward to coming back at the end of the episode and seeing where Michigan lands on your list. But now that we've learned a little bit about the state of Michigan, Dakota, I'm going to throw it over to you. Give us a couple famous, infamous murderers that hail from the state of Michigan.
All right, I'm gonna start off with Larry and Danny Rains. They were two serial killing brothers from Kalamazoo, but there's a twist in their story. They didn't actually work together. So Larry was only 19 years old when he went on a killing spree in 1964. That spanned 2 months, and he claimed up to 5 victims. And he's still alive in prison to this day.
Okay.
While his older brother Danny killed 4 people 8 years later, 1972, and he died in prison last year.
Okay, that's very interesting. You have 2 brothers and they're on their own separate murders, but you'd almost think that they would be working together, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I know at least Missouri, we covered a serial killing family.
Right.
Now they work together. These 2 did their own thing.
I wonder if they were competing against one another potentially.
I don't know. What kind of parents do you have to raise 2 serial killers?
Yeah, that's wild.
It is pretty crazy.
Very wild. All right, what do we got next?
Yep, I'm gonna move on to Andrew. I think Kehoe is his name. Now, this guy is famous for being the first bomber on U.S. soil. He was a treasurer of a local school board in Bath Township, which we have in Ohio, but in Michigan. He was so furious that the tax that was being levied to pay for the school that he just blew the whole school up, and he killed 45 people. And then he killed himself in a separate bombing.
Oh, okay. Well, that's one way to get, no new taxes.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Yeah. That's a little extreme, but all right, man.
Yeah, okay. All right, Andrew. No new taxes for you. All right. I think we got one more. What do we got?
One more. I got Carl Watts. He's also known as the Sunday Morning Slasher. Watts was convicted of 22 murders from 74 to 82, but those numbers are believed to be much higher. It's actually possible that he killed up to 100 women in 8-year span.
Yikes. Okay. So not only does Michigan have a lot of potential attractions and things to see, but some pretty notable serial killers. All right, so that's all about Michigan, things to do, infamous murders who hailed in the state of Michigan. Dakota, I'm going to throw it over to you. Let's go ahead and kick off our murder case of the week.
Kind of piggybacking off of the Carl Watts, you got to wonder with some of these killers that have been caught, how many would continue to murder like we've seen in some of the famous murder sessions that we've discussed weekly. In most serial killer cases with the really high counts, they purposely target people who they think that they can get away with it because no one will be looking for them.
Right.
And 3 of our 10 cases so far have started with a missing persons report, the same as today's. On October 27, 2014, a woman by the name of Terry O'Donnell showed up to the Iron River Police Department very distraught. A friend of hers had gone missing. It had been 13 days since Chris Regan had been in contact with anyone. The last day they spoke on the 14th, Chris was set to leave the following morning for a job in the Carolinas. She went to his apartment and everything was still there, but no signs of him. And then a coworker found his car at a car park that was in a neighboring town, but still no word from him. And in the car, there was only just a drawing of a map.
So Chris himself, he didn't have many friends outside of Terry. So the only people that knew anything about him were his coworkers. Terry and some of his coworkers both mentioned that there had been word that Chris himself was involved in a relationship with a lady who worked at the same place. That person also happened to be married. She was a married woman by the name of Kelly Cochran. And you mentioned a map in his car. Well, the map in Chris's car actually led to Kelly Cochran's house. Kelly had been married to her husband, Jason, for 13 years. And although they were polar opposites, according to Jason's family, they just made it work. So according to Kelly, it was an open marriage. And, open marriages, those always work. Never any problems whatsoever. So according to Kelly, she was in control of everything, including finances. And in return, she was allowed to have affairs. I feel like that's a pretty fair trade-off, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, great.
What could go wrong? Unfortunately, this was not what Jason himself agreed on. And naturally, he was not happy that she was having an affair with Chris.
The 2 of them were interrogated by police, and both had very different experiences. Jason spent his time at the station talking about himself, his health problems, which he had a bunch of health problems stemming from an injury at work, and that's why Kelly was in control of all the finances because he wasn't working and she was.
Yeah, he was a bum,
Right.
And because of that, she's allowed to sleep around. Okay.
Now, Kelly's experience being interrogated by police, she spent hers talking about how much she loved Chris. Following the interrogation, police executed a search warrant on the Cochran's home. After a day-long search, the police packed up a bunch of evidence and left. The following morning, Kelly and Jason, they were spooked by all the police in their house that they filled their truck and fled the state.
Oh, not
This
suspicious.
would raise a lot of suspicions, but not a single piece of the evidence that was gathered from their house pointed to a murder or that Chris had even been there, so they were taken off the suspect list. Unfortunately, that's where our case goes cold. There was no suspects, there was no evidence for a whole year that would lead the police to put the case on the back burner. So we have a cold case with Chris. However, on February 20th, 2016, the Hobart Emergency Services in Indiana got a call from Kelly Cochran that she'd found her husband dead. The cause of death was a suspected overdose. Since the 2 were involved in a missing persons case, the FBI took notice of Jason's death and they were present for his autopsy. And this is where they discovered something other than an overdose. The actual cause of death was a strangulation, and that was covering up the overdose that they thought was the cause. So once again, Kelly was being investigated for a murder. Since it was FBI involved now, they knew more than the local police department would have. And when they interrogated her for a second time, it turned into sort of a cat and mouse game. The detective acted like he didn't know about Chris, and in turn, he forced Kelly to bring it up. She initiated the conversation by asking if Jason's death was the only thing that they would be questioning her about. And the detective, Jeremy Ogden, that took the case, knew he would have to find out what happened to Chris before he would eventually find out what happened to Jason.
So with the help of one of Jason's friends, Ogden came up with a plan to get Kelly to admit to the murder through a fake letter. The friend would call Kelly with a letter supposedly from Jason that was to be released if anything ever happened to him. And this guy put on just an Oscar worthy performance and had Kelly fully 100% into it, begging him not to release this letter.
No, this was a long shot, just a fake letter, a fake phone call. And the guy did so well that the police were just stunned that it actually worked, and got Kelly to fall for it. So shortly after Kelly reached out to Detective Ogden with a confession, Jason was actually Chris's murderer, according to her story. And the two of them were making out on the stairs when Jason came up from behind and shot him in the head, but didn't know what happened to the body.
With their son now dead, Jason Cochran's parents spoke with police about some conversations that were brought up in their house. Jason had once stated before that if he were to ever kill someone, he would cut up their body and feed them to pigs to get rid of any evidence. Just a random, normal family conversation.
Yeah, my family, we always have the Sunday evening conversations about how we would cover up murders.
If you were going to kill someone, how would you do it?
Right. Now, our lead investigator in Jason's death was Jeremy Ogden, as I stated, the FBI. And the lead investigator of Chris's death was Laura Frizzo, the chief of the Iron River Police Department. The two of them were now working on the cases simultaneously to figure out what happened. Back in Iron River, Frizzo interviewed old neighbors of the Cochrans where they said they remembered a night around the time of Chris's disappearance where they heard power tools running around 3 a.m. And this caused Kelly to finally admit that they cut up his body, and she would agree to show police where it was. And within 10 minutes of searching, they found his skull and the murder weapon that they used.
So we'll go ahead and jump to the trial. With Kelly admitting to the involvement in Chris's murder, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now, pretty simple, clear-cut case. There's our trial. And that's usually where we would wrap things up. But this is not the end of our story. Kelly Cochran, now in prison for life, she basically had nothing to lose. And with this sentencing, she decided to admit to her life that was full of murder. Our story actually starts with a marriage pact between Kelly and Jason. The night of their wedding, they promised that if one of them was ever caught cheating, they'd be forced to kill the person they were cheating with. Again, just, me and my wife, we have a couple of these pacts in place. If you cook dinner, then I'll do the dishes. If I do the laundry, then you fold them and put them away. I feel like that's pretty normal. But in this case, hey, if you cheat, then you are forced to kill that person. Totally normal. Since Kelly was caught cheating, she lured him into their home, allowing Jason to kill him. She actually loved Chris and felt really guilty for it afterwards, thus leading her to actually murder her own husband.
Now, one would think if you made a pact like this where you had to kill your lover, you wouldn't cheat. But no, she actually had up to 3 that she admitted to having affairs with. So 2 people got away with their lives. Now, the definition of a serial killer is someone who kills 3 or more people. So we have 2 victims that Kelly has under her belt at this point, but she can't be classified as a serial killer. But through some conversations with Jason's family, there's believed to be many more victims between the killer couple. Now, they claim to have killed anywhere between 9 to 20 people. A lot of them were prostitutes. Now, this makes you wonder if they kept killing prostitutes and hadn't moved on to Chris, they could have done many more. And without Terry McDowell's missing report, they could have just kept going.
Yeah, I mean, without that missing persons report, I mean, this killer couple could have been at the start of our episode with notable serial killers from the state of Michigan. But thankfully, that missing persons report came in and they were kind of at the end of their run. So yeah, what an interesting case, and a lot of just wild agreements and pacts. What an interesting little couple that we had today.
So I read something interesting. It kind of has something to do with the case, but the Iron River police chief, Laura, she actually lost her job because of this case. She became so obsessed with finding Chris's killer that she had no interest in any other cases, and it really affected her performance. And
Oh,
she ended up getting fired over it.
yikes. Hate to hear that. With the conclusion of this week's case and, taking into account the infamous serial killers from the state of Michigan and Dakota, we had a couple different interesting attractions and things to see. The state of Michigan itself, just a state full of natural beauty. I would like to throw it over to you. Tell me what you think about the state of Michigan. Is this a state you'll be visiting someday? And lastly, where would you put it on our ranking?
All right. So being from Ohio, most people do not like Michigan. We don't give a damn for the whole state of Michigan. It's a song. Before this episode, I would have had to put Michigan probably in the 30s, but you did a hell of a job of selling the state. These attractions, I didn't know about them, but they're pretty awesome. So they move way up on my list. This is one of the few times that
Okay.
you convinced me.
All
So you
right.
did a great job. I'm gonna have to put them at 15. So I
15.
bumped them from 30s up to 15 after hearing more about the state.
Okay. 15. And, another thing about Michigan is it's a state that's closer to us. I mean, we could get into a car and you could drive to Michigan, make it a day trip. Does that impact your ranking when you're looking at a state? The fact that you can just go there within a day opposed to a 40-hour drive or a 5-hour flight, or does that not really matter to you?
I'm not really ranking these based on that,
Okay.
but my life, the way I'm set up, um, I don't think like that. I can't
Okay.
just get in a car and drive somewhere on the weekend.
Sure. I get
I'm
that.
not a spur of the moment person. I have to plan things out.
Okay.
I'm working Monday through Friday, and on the weekends I got my dog, and that's very important to me to spend time with her. So
Okay.
I'm not really traveling unless I really need to.
All right. So location doesn't really factor into it. I gotcha. All right. All right. So as we begin our departure from the state of Michigan, wanted to give a quick shout out once again to our faithful listener up in the state of Michigan. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. This is the conclusion of episode 11 of 50 States, 50 Murders. Thanks again for everyone who's followed along. 10 states in, now 11. And, we recapped all those states. You can check those out on Spotify. Hopefully Apple's coming soon. Again, just a big thank you for tuning in each and every week as we continue covering a new state as well as a new murder case that happened to take place there.
If you have not already, please be sure to follow and subscribe, and tune in next week for episode 12.